All right, we've got a viewer's question that came in. They saw my video and they said, hey, you mentioned that this is a drop-in replacement, or can be eventually here, a drop-in replacement for the WS66i. And they wanted to know, can you compare the physical form factor of these two amplifiers? And I thought that was a great question. So in this video, we're going to be going over the physical form of both of these amplifiers. So first and foremost, the weight of these is one of the biggest differences. As I unmounted this is what I have installed in my house at the moment, and I'll be doing a video where we listen and hook this up. So I went ahead and unhooked this, and this thing weighs 25 pounds. I'll actually show the picture here, the exact weight. And this one weighs 14 pounds. So I was actually pretty shocked about that. The fact that two amplifiers that seemingly you would think are doing the same thing, they pretty much are. And this one comes in so much lighter. And let me tell you, when you're mounting this by yourself on a rack, you definitely feel the extra 11 pounds in this amplifier. So this one is so much lighter. Let's look at the front. We've got the power button. We've got lights that illuminate, which tells you which zones are on and off and in standby. And then we've got two USB source inputs. Now here you can plug in two USB sticks that have music on them, and it allows you to be able to play the music on the WS66i. Coming over here, the front of this, I love this e-ink display. Now this works similar if you've ever seen how those Amazon Kindles work. This is an e-ink display. And what's really cool is that it says the IP address of your amplifier, which is used in the mobile application. Now this thing can also be hooked up to the network, but finding the IP address involves going into the mobile app and trying to have the mobile app search for it and find it. And right here, it gives it to you right here, as well as some status indicators, the serial number, your host, and all of that good stuff. So this is really, really nice. And then we also have the standard zone indicator lights that work very similar to the WS66i, and that is about it on the front here. Now, let's also talk about this. These are stackable. It is perfectly fine to stack these. Again, we talked in my first video. If you haven't seen that, go back and take a look at it. You can put 5 more on top of this. And they built it like that on purpose because the bottom and the top looks just like this. There's no holes or anything. And they built fans to move air through the side. That way, it's perfectly safe to stack these. Now, in the WS66i, there is no fan. So as a result, there's holes all over the tops and the sides, and that's to get heat out of there. So we have fans on this one that move laterally, which is a really good design. And here we have holes all over, so that way the heat can get out all over, but no fans on the WS66i. So let's go right ahead and check out the back. All right, so on the back of the WS66i, you've got, of course, your Phoenix connectors here, and the plugs on these will fit the plugs on the AmpliPro. However, the AmpliPro plugs will not fit very nicely. You can get them to fit. Trust me, you can get it to fit. It will technically work, but they are pretty well stuck in there. You may have to get a pair of pliers because I almost couldn't get them out when I used the AmpliPro plugs on the WS66i. But the pitch of these must be just slightly smaller on the WS66i to where they fit into here a lot better. So just keep that in mind. You can go easier from the WS66i to the AmpliPro than you can backwards. So we've got our zones here and our preamp line level outputs as well here for the zones 1 through 6. And then we also have IR emitters here. We have PA and a mute control. We also have our source inputs, So here's our inputs. We have the 2 sets of RCA. We've got one 3.5 millimeter and another 3.5 millimeter or optical out. So those are our inputs there. And then we've got 2 Ethernet ports. So what this is used for is you can hook up, this is basically a network switch, a built-in network switch. So you've got one port here that you can plug in your network, and this can act as a secondary device. It could go into a wireless access point, it could go into a Raspberry Pi, but this acts as a second network switch. And then you've got your expansion ports here. So your output of here can go into the input of another unit if you're chaining these together for more zones. And then you've got your selector here. This selects whether this is the master, the first unit, or whether it's your second, your slave 1 or your slave 2. And then you've got your jack for your keypads. This is what powers the keypad hub. And the keypad hub is where all of your keypads come in, and it's your common connection point. And then you've got an RS-232 connection as well here on the back, and your power plug and your voltage selector. So several ports here, a lot more ports here than there is on the AmpliPro. So on the AmpliPro, we have the power port, you've got your expansion port, so that's similar on this one. You'll chain this out into the input of a secondary unit. You've got a service USB, so if you ever need to reflash the firmware, if something happens, you can do that with the service USB. We have 2 USB ports on the back here. So on the WS66i, it was on the front, and on this one, it's on the back. You have a 3.5 millimeter auxiliary in, as well as 4 RCA inputs, whereas on the WS66i, there was only 2 RCA inputs, but you did have either two 3.5 millimeter or one 3.5 millimeter and an optical. So on this one, it does not have native optical for an input, if that matters to you. And then you've got your zones here, 1 through 6 again, and your line level preamp outputs, just like you did on the WS66i. So a few things that you don't have on the AmpliPro that you did over here would be like IR emitters, if you were using these, and then zone status control. So things that you can use these for, it's defined in their manual, but it's things like controlling a projector screen. These are 12 volt triggers is what these are. And then you've got 12 volt PA system. So when 12 volts is applied here, I think it's one of these sources, source 6 or 5, but it says it in the manual. When 12 volts is applied here, then anything broadcasting over, one of these sources, that's what gets applied to all of your zones. So these here, you are lacking those on the AmpliPro. But for the most part, other than, again, a little network switch, which this is only running, the second port only runs at 100 megabit per second. So really you probably wouldn't want to use it for a Wi-Fi access point anyway, because it would have a slower speed. So other than this, your controls here, it is, and of course, different inputs, but for the most part, the same type of inputs. Those are the differences. So lastly, I wanted to compare, I'm gonna put the camera down real quick and put this on top of this one. And we're gonna look at the depth and the length and the width. Okay, so I have stacked this. So width-wise, they are the same width, and that is obviously normal because these are rack mountable devices, and so they are a standardized width in order for them to fit into a rack. But look at the length. So when dealing with a closed-in cabinet, the AmpliPro is significantly shorter, so accessing the back is a lot easier with the AmpliPro. Not much to see in the front. We do have a recessed front plate here, so you can see that the way that the ears are on the WS66i, it causes the front of this to be recessed a little bit. whereas the AmpliPro is just one flat piece. It's not recessed. So those are the big differences and the physical comparison.